We have forgotten that the 90s, in fact, were a nightmare for millions who were caught in the crushing depression that followed the panic of 1893. Money was so scarce and credit so overstrained that scores of the most powerful banks, manufacturers, mortgage companies, and railroads fell. Fear was so widespread that much of the nation's gold coinage was hoarded. It was into this context that an otherwise routine event occurred that was to fire the imagination of the nation. On July 15th, the Excelsior, a steam schooner chartered by the Alaska Commercial Company, docked in San Francisco. Down the gangway, a small group of men struggled with grips and suitcases bulging with gold. In a day, the word had flashed across the country. An unbelievably rich gold strike had been made on the tributaries of the Klondike River, deep in the Canadian Yukon, 2,500 miles north by sea and land from San Francisco. 2 days later, the Portland steamed into Seattle with more than 2 tons of gold from the Klondike, and the city went mad. Half the streetcar motormen, for instance, left their jobs. Even the mayor resigned to head for the gold field. The Klondike madness raged across the country, and tens of thousands set out to join the rush. Gold coins, which had been hoarded during the bitter panic, came out of hiding, and many millions were spent on the goods and gear required for the arduous journey. Thousands fought to buy a berth on Alaska-bound ships, and the price of passage north in all the coastal ports soared to 10 times that which it had been prior to the arrival of the news. Most of the adventurers sailed north through the Alaska Inside Passage, the trails that led to the headwaters of the Yukon River. Beyond Juneau, 100 miles to the north, lay the end of the Inside Passage. There, the rough and ragtag settlements of Skagway and Dyea had sprung up with the news of the Great Strike. The first arrivals swarmed onto the beaches in a fever to reach the Klondike, 600 miles away, before the country was locked fast in the 8-month Yukon winter. Skagway and Dyea sat 3 miles apart, each at the mouth of the narrow river for which it was named. From Skagway, an untried trail led to the White Pass, and from Dyea, a trail which had been used for years led over the spectacular Chilkoot Pass. Beyond the passes lay the lakes, where most were destined to spend the winter. There were other routes to the gold fields, but 9 out of 10 stampeders passed through either Skagway or Dyea in the first year of the rush. As the human tide grew, the towns took on a look of order, although it would be another year before American law was firmly planted. All through the winter and into the summer of 1898, Skagway and Dyea were run by Soapy Smith, a notorious confidence man from Colorado, and his gang of thugs and cheats. The chain of humanity that streamed through the towns and onto the trails were drawn from every cut of life. Farm boys, housewives, carpenters, writers, card sharks, clergymen, doctors, merchants, miners, dance hall girls. All were driven by the glowing vision of Klondike gold, gold in abundance, there for the taking. As the trail steepened, the pace slowed, and many thousands, no one knows the count, turned back that summer and in the winter that followed, beaten by the harsh terrain Chilkoot Trail was a long and steep mass of immense boulders. Rugged as it was, the Chilkoot Pass proved to be a far easier route that summer than the White Pass Trail to the south. There, the muck and fallen trees, the jagged, rocky outcroppings broke the spirit of strong men and ravaged the pack animals. The trail had been advertised as an all-weather route to the gold fields, suitable even for wagons. But to those who tried to cross that summer, the opening of the pass was not a blunder, it was a crime. Jack London witnessed it all. The horses died like mosquitoes in the first frost. And from Skagway to Bennett, they rotted in heaps. They died at the rocks, they fell off the trail, they snapped their legs in the crevices or were smashed to pieces against the boulders. Men worked them to death and then went back to the beach and bought more. Their hearts turned to stone, those which did not break, and they became beasts, the men on the Dead Horse Trail. With the snows of winter, the cruel rocks and broken carcasses of summer were covered, and the stench of rotting carrion no longer choked the air. But the trail remained punishing. The exhausting climb, the shortage of feed, chronic abuse and overloading continued to take heavy toll of the pack animals. They were sacrificed so that 5,000 men could make their way across the pass to the headwaters of the Yukon. By the end of winter in '98, 3,000 animals had perished on the Dead Horse Trail. By the time the first snows had fallen, the Mounties guarding the Canadian border were enforcing a new rule. Every man headed for the Yukon had to carry food and supplies sufficient to last a year. It meant that by one means or another, each stampeder had to pack a ton of food and gear over the tortuous trails. At the foot of the Chilkoot Trail, on the beach at Dai, supplies continued to pour ashore in great volume, as they did at Skagway. Perhaps 60 million pounds of provisions were carried over the passes before the winter ended. The Chilkoot Trail was the poor man's trail. While some pack animals were used by those with the money to afford them, most of the gold seekers who took this route packed their food and equipment on sleds and on their backs. Although the Chilkoot Pass was steeper and higher by 600 feet than the White Pass, it was a quicker and shorter route to the lakes. But quick and short are relative terms. It took each man on the average of 3 months to pack his outfit from Dai over the pass to Lake Linden. The distance was only 25 miles, but the man on foot trudged many hundreds of miles back and forth along the trail, moving his gear from cache to cache. The final climb produced one of the most moving photographic images in American history. No staged version of this event could ever match the incredible drama created by the 22,000 men who struggled up the 30-degree incline to cross the Chilkoot Pass in the winter of 1897-98. The average man carried about 50 pounds each trip up the 1,500 steps carved into the icy face below the pass. And it was rare when he could make more than one trip a day. For some men, it meant as many as 40 bone-wearying climbs in 40 freezing days to get their outfits over the top. each man waiting to check through Canadian customs and register the mountain. From there, it was an easy run to Lake Lindenham and Lake Bennett. Once at the lakes, the stampeders settled down for a long winter's stay. Before the spring thaw, they would have ample time to build the boats and barges that would carry them downstream to Dawson, a brand new city that flourished on the banks of the Yukon, where the waters of the Klondike joined it. While a few had carried in knockdown boats or finished lumber, almost all had to whipsaw planks from the slender spruce which grew on the slopes leading down to the lakes. It was an exacting job, one that taxed the tempers of all who tried it. It was said that the experience ended more good friendships than any institution, except marriage. One observer wrote, "It should be suppressed,